Welcome to Crypto Disrupted, a cryptocurrency and blockchain podcast with your hosts, Trent Lipinski and Greg Kerr.
Well, welcome to another edition of Crypto Disrupted. We're here with a special guest today, Matan Field, calling in from Israel. And as we've been exploring how the blockchain is going to interact with humanity and how it's going to impact our lives, this is a special guest to come in and talk about governing systems and a unique way that they're putting them together. So Matan, thanks for being on the show. And
thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us some background, where you're from, where you're educated, things like that.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
So, well, I've spent most of my professional career in the academy. I've been working on my PhD and postdoc research in string theory, theoretical physics, string theory in particular. So that's like my kind of like professional side. And then in part of that, I was interested in alternative organizational models for about 2 decades. And more at the experimental side of that, I founded a food cooperative and a communal garden to explore different ways to cooperate with like a strong sense that the regular corporate structure is broken, and mostly from the sense that like the alignment of interest of, for example, stakeholders and employees and customers are not very in good alignment. So that was like kind of like occupying me more as a hobby. And then about 4 years ago, I discovered the blockchain and all these came together. So I quit the academy, and in the last 4 years, I was fully focused on building platforms and protocols for decentralized governance, decentralized organizations, if you want corporations on scale.
Okay,
Yes.
so this idea of like, so decentralizing rule systems and creating autonomous organizations, or like, I would say like setting forth an algorithm that doesn't end or kind of perpetually executes.
Right. So the idea is that like how like, thousands of people for any purpose, how thousands of people can self-organize around shared goals, shared interests, shared values, and join forces into unified action. And if you drill down, is the question like how do you design microscopically, like at the individual level, how you design the incentive in order to trigger the desired collective behavior, if you want collective cooperative behavior. So it's like the crypto economics for cooperation at scale.
Okay. All right. And I saw that you call that in your white paper, this non-cooperative Nash equilibrium.
I mean, we are now trapped in non-cooperative Nash equilibrium, and we want to move into the cooperative Nash equilibrium. So it's another Nash equilibrium, but the point is that we are trapped in the non-cooperative Nash equilibrium.
So the incentive system is based on competition at this point, is what you're saying, and then
yes.
What your systems do is break that down and create paralleled interests and cooperation.
Yeah.
I think, Matan, can you kind of give an overview of what you believe the problem is that you're solving? Because I think that's, for the audience, I think that's kind of a good place to start is, what is the problem that you see? You've got this crazy background, you're a physicist, you've got PhDs. So what is it that you're seeing as a problem, and why do you see what you're working on as a solution?
Right. So yeah, you can penetrate that from various directions. Let me try like a couple. The point is that, so think about for example, the organization, the notion of organization, like what organization are for, really. So clearly the organization are for the ability of numerous people to join forces around aligned action and basically, scale up for scaled up actions, right? So aligning interests of many, that's the purpose of an organization. The problem is that the more you're growing an organization, the more it's hard to actually align incentive, because you have more interest to align, more diversity. And in order to align them, you need more rigid structure. But then more rigid structure means less freedom, less agility, less efficiencies. And that's why like organizations scale up very badly. like what's the alternative to that? Like, so the alternative to that right now, like if you look at the opposite of that, it's like the economy, the free market economy. So the free market economy is, so the organization today, because of its rigid structure, is centralized, it's top down, etc. Where the free market economy is completely bottom up, it's completely decentralized, and that's why it scales up so nicely. So the interaction can happen at a very large scale. But the problem with the free market economy is that there is no alignment of interest. So basically, there is an environment for complete pure competition. And while locally, the system basically marginalized in terms of efficiencies, so it's kind of become more and more efficient locally. But then globally, it can be highly inefficient. It's so inefficient that it can actually drag us all together into a global destruction. So the question, so that's the problem. Like there is no good way to scale up collaboration, and there is no good way to align the interest in a free market economy. So then the question, how do you take that like free market economy, like decentralized system, together with the notion of organization, alignment of interest, coordination, and create something in between? Like how do you create a system that allows thousands and millions of people to cooperate nicely, and then be in a win-win situation, where right now they're in a win-lose situation. And more so, the win-lose situation is so dramatical, is that we actually have, each of us in a way has the incentive to not only sometimes bad act, but actually even create misinformation. Like if for example, if you are the owner of big oil company, you actually have the incentive to tell everyone that green energy is dead, right? So and that's a problem. So if we have the incentive to damage sense making, then clearly we have bad sense making. So we have to align interest again, and create the tools for people to have the incentive to do the right thing, to have the incentive to do what they believe they should do, and then we can create a better environment, better cooperation. So that's exactly what we're doing. So designing the incentive mechanism at the individual microscopic level in order to generate a cooperative and sense-making processes at the microscopic collective behavior.
I actually saw a really good example of this. So I was watching, I believe it's called Dirty Money on Netflix. It's like a new documentary series where they're like talking about kind of like, all these different like corporate, disasters. I don't know what else to call them. So I was watching the episode on VW and about what they had, what happened with their cars, where they created these defeat devices on the cars that defeated the environmental standards test. So when you actually when you did the test, the car passed, all the environmental protections with flying colors. But then when you actually operated the vehicle, the amount of pollution it was outputting was like, 7-8 times what it was supposed to be. And, ultimately that probably came down to a corporate culture where, cheating was acceptable, because, ultimately it was about trying to sell cars. And, they did a whole ad campaign about misleading the public about how clean this diesel technology was that they knew wasn't clean. So I think that's potentially an example of, how organizations can, mislead the public and can actually do more harm than good. And, ultimately that was, the result of potentially this hierarchy within this company, and them trying to figure out, how do we manage this situation that they themselves created, because, there was no transparency, there were no checks and balances, there was no system in place to stop them from doing this. So, of course, in the United States and Europe, everyone's pollution levels, they weren't meeting their targets, and they couldn't figure out why. And everyone's buying these diesel cars that are outputting 8 times what they're supposed to in pollution. So could your software, could that be a potential solution to this problem?
Yeah, sure. But of course, that's the whole purpose. But before that, I want to say something else. Like you're presenting it as if it's like a peculiar or something. Like I would say that this is actually the standard. Like everywhere you look, every time, that's what's happening. Like a company that makes washing machines, they actually have the incentives to make them such that they will fall apart in 2 years. Whereas maybe they can actually use material that will make them not fall apart in 20 years, but they don't have the incentive to do so. So in almost every area of our life, in all the time, we have the incentives to do the wrong thing for everyone. And if we just had the incentive to do the right thing, we will all be in a radically win-win situation with a total new world. So that's exactly what we're doing. So setting up the stage for large number of people to get into a game where they're setting the incentives correctly, and then take care for the whole, for the whole circle benefit of the collective. So if you want a win-win situation, and if you extend that, if you expand that logic into a global scale, the result is what we call the anti-rival economy. So it's not only rival, it's not rival economy, it's anti-rival economy. So it's an economy that rewards the right action. It's economies that reward the production, for example, of reusable elements and anti-rival basically resources. So resources that are more valuable as more they are shared in the society.
Okay, and I'm just putting it together too. So you're in a kibbutz as well.
Yes.
So this is starting to like mesh together, that you're computer scientists and kibbutzim, and these kind of two worlds colliding, and these ideas coming together with code. So like thousands-year-old ideas of community and value.
The only thing is that I'm not qualified for a computer scientist. I'm qualified for a physicist hardly, but definitely not a computer scientist.
All right. Well, yeah, I use the liberal term in that manner. But yeah, okay. So now I'm starting to see that you've kind of digitized or kind of like created an algorithm, a set of rules that accomplish kind of what this kibbutzim philosophy of community is. And it's basically resulted in a way that you can build win-win scenarios. And
so
also kick out the elements. Or you're saying if it's you're talking about kicking out the bad actors out of the system, or at least the system will now self-identify the bad actors, right?
Yeah. So two things. So firstly, the big difference from kibbutz is that the kibbutz philosophy really worked on a very, very small scale. And that's like the biggest problem of all this like area. How do you do that at large scale? So there is like internal paradoxes that seems kind of like that it doesn't work at large scale. So much of the challenge was to design these kind of protocols to have a line of interest at scale. If you want, it's a different physics. It's physics, like different rules than a small scale. A small scale is more about social like interactions between people, and large scale is in a way asocial. Like you actually want people to do the right thing just because they are maximizing their own benefit. So it's a different rules. And yes, definitely, as you said, like the whole purpose is to enable a large scale system to identify the right action and enhance them, and to identify the bad action and basically put them down. So it does so, yeah, it does that, and that's clearly a preliminary criteria for a successful protocol.
Well, and one of the things I noticed in your white paper that was really interesting to me was that you also have the ability to kind of weight, the potential votes of one individual, and that could also be weighted not just on, potentially authority, but actually participation. So someone who's been, at a project or working in an organization for a long time could potentially have, a little more weight to their vote for proposals and for, certain situations, or possibly, a manager of a specific team, maybe be able to, outvote, 2 or 3 of his team members and that kind of thing. Can you kind of explain the different system and how you can kind of weight votes and kind of set up different types of teams and organizations within this overall, new organizational structure? Yes,
sure. So generally we call that like meritocracy. So weighted meritocracy, or weighted democracy or meritocracy, reputation-based system basically. And the idea, the point is that there are many ways to kind of have a permutation permeating the system. We call it reputation flow. So, but let me give you like the most simple example. So let's say that you are founding now a new organization. So you're the only person in the organization. There's just one man show, and then you're doing your stuff, and then I want to join your organization. So I do my stuff, and then you're really appreciating me. So you decide, you make a proposition to allocate some reputation to me. So when I say reputation, I really mean voting power. So maybe I can use just power, but let's just stay with reputation. So I have some reputation Now it's no longer your system, it's actually our system because we both run it together. And then maybe Greg sees what we are doing and he's really happy about it, and he makes some contribution of his own, and then we are happy about his contribution, and we decide together via our decision-making system, we decide to allocate reputation to Greg. Then now it's our three of us are making decisions in the system. And gradually, any person that is, so the point is that in this very simplistic and manual protocol, anytime that someone is doing a contribution that the majority of, the weighted majority by the existing reputation system is appreciating, they can decide to allocate to him or to her a further new reputation score. So that's like, I would call it manual reputation flow. We actually, at each point in time, the weighted majority can decide to allocate reputation to another participant. And then there are more sophisticated algorithms, which we call like algorithmic reputation flow, such that when we do some sort of activity, which can be algorithmically appreciated. So some activities cannot be algorithmically appreciated, but some activities can be algorithmically appreciated. For example, you're placing a vote which is aligned with the majority. So basically you're aligned with majority, and then you're gradually getting more reputation in an algorithmic fashion, and that can spread much, much faster. So the point is that the system, because at each point in time you get reputation if you're aligned with the system can retain its alignment, and even you can even design the system to increase over time its alignment. Now, of course, you can ask, but what happens if I'm not aligned with the system? Then great, then you can just fork and open a new value system where you are the reputation holder. Then whoever is aligned with you gets more reputation, more voting power. So eventually the outcome of all of that is like a high variety, like large number of competing value systems, which basically explore all possible decision-making space.
And this has already kind of happened. I mean, right now you've got Bitcoin, and then you've got Bitcoin Cash.
Exactly.
So you've literally have a fork, where a part of the community said, my values are different than the values of what, these developers are doing with Bitcoin. And you have a part of the community that said, we're going to go follow Satoshi's vision, and we're going to, increase the block size, bring transaction fees down, and we're going to follow a different philosophy, and we're going to follow a different set of values. So you're essentially creating software so that in situations like that, for your organizational structure, you could actually, the teams could actually then potentially split. And then now one team can go focus on their set of values with their intention, and the other team can go focus on theirs. And does create a little bit of competition in a sense, but at the same time, hopefully in this case, the team with the best value system will win out.
Yeah, exactly. So it's exactly the same, like the forking philosophy, but the only difference is actually much broader. So in blockchain forking, you just fork specifically the code of blockchain. So the governance is very particular, but then in a general governance system, you can have value system around any shared goal or interest or values, and then you can fork those interests, those values, so you can have a much broader value system.
Yeah. So when we first started our efforts here on this energy coin, I remember having a brainstorm with Trent, and we're thinking about, where this can go. And our minds quickly went to a DAO. And we were like, this changes our goals. And most corporations have, corporate goals of, growth and profits, things like that. I was just like, our ultimate goal would be to set up such a flat organization and start building smart contracts between the members of our team, and start this relationship where, I was thinking and imagining currency where you're talking about reputation, kind of saying that's the value system in there. So if I could create an economy to create a waste to energy project in Senegal, let's say, and I fabricate so much of my reputation and start passing it around the people around me, and they're like earning this kind of reputation by helping me pursue this goal. And so we started like imagining an organization that the ultimate goal would be that one day, some 13-year-old girl in India would write a script that would take over our company. Somebody that never knew us. And like, we just created the biggest meritocracy on the planet that was pro-environment, open to anybody to participate. Hence, anybody could come in and write in a more efficient way of doing things and take over control. Are we thinking in the right kind of ways? Like I'm starting to mesh where you're coming from, and in reading your white paper, kind of opening my ideas and thoughts into that type of environment.
Yeah, totally. So I mean, also Trent mentioned before, like this thinking about also the possibility of competition sneaking in, but that's true. So the thing is that these kind of systems are leading to what I would call competition. So it's not about not having competition, but it's really about more like about freedom, and freedom together with the possibility to align interest at scale. So yes, I mean, if you're enforcing someone not to compete with you, if you're enforcing someone, to stick to your value system, then clearly there is no freedom in that. And this kind of like this, it's not a true alignment of interest. So forking out is good as much as it's needed. Or if you want like an analogy from nature, I mean, the thing is that the system is designed to enable two different companies to share resources wherever they agree about, and then compete on whatever they don't agree about. It's kind of like, in a way, like think about a tree that many of its leaves are, the interface of that tree are competing for light, but they're also sharing resources from below, right? So it's the same thing, like sharing the resources that are common to two different projects, but then at the same time compete about the differentiation that they don't agree about. That we call competition.
We were exploring using the tree of life actually for our logo, and that's kind of one of the things we've been toying with actually. And we've been kind of trying to incorporate the concepts of like as above, so below, into kind of how we operate and how we approach things as well. Because ultimately, I'm a former startup CEO. I ran a startup for 5 years, and I mean, I don't want to be CEO again. It was kind of an awful experience, to be honest with you. I was managing 20 people, and it was a lot. I wish there was a tool that allowed my team to be able to accomplish things on their own. I wish I didn't have to be involved in some of the conversations and, have to, give the thumbs up and approval on everything. My team, I think, honestly, they knew better than I did in many situations. And I think if they had the tools to be able to make those decisions on their own, that would have probably made the company more successful. If anything, my involvement as CEO possibly was a bottleneck at times. And it actually possibly slowed down innovation, and it actually possibly slowed us down and prevented us from accomplishing things when, ultimately, again, my team, they knew what they were doing. They were the ones, in the trenches. They were the ones dealing with customer support. They were the ones programming. They knew how to fix bugs. They knew what our customer base wanted. I had to get that information from them to then make decisions. So, if they could just act on that information themselves and, have a tool to be able to make those decisions, and then as, someone who then is the CEO, to be able to then have a system to go see that transparency and go see, hey, they made this decision because, this customer was doing this or whatever, and being able to have that transparency. Now I know that, hey, I don't need to have that conversation with them. I can go focus on something that I know will go benefit them, and that I will know, will go benefit the intention of what we're trying to accomplish. So, ultimately, I love this idea of having kind of a WordPress for decentralized organizations, because this will change how startups operate, especially, it sounds like you guys are going to open source this. You've got code written. Can you kind of go into that and talk about, where you're at?
Sure. But just before that, I really want to emphasize something really important here. So you mentioned startups, and you're totally right. Like, your vision is completely correct. But the one thing I want to emphasize is that, like, it's definitely going to change startups, but that's not the exciting thing.
Yeah.
So the really big thing is the ability to scale that up. Like, just changing startup is cool, but if you can scale that up, if you can have that same efficiency taking place for thousands of people, you actually change society forever. So you actually create a new form of organization. Like if you were just able to align interests of the 1,000 top talents in the world, they would be probably more powerful than the nation state. And I'm serious about that. So and then if you can align interest of 1 million people, talented people, they will probably be the largest force in the world, which really brings back the power to people. So the importance about aligning interest and governance at scale, decentralized governance at scale. But then the challenge there is a big challenge there. It's not trivial because let me just give you an example of why it's so hard to make decentralized governance, and then also maybe to hint for the solution. So the thing is that, let's for now, like just for simplicity, let's say that all agents are equal, so they have equal votes, right? And let's say that you have 1,000 agents or 1 million agents, 1 million people. And clearly, then you want to make a lot of decisions, right? So the whole circle is basically a decision-making engine. So now you have a lot of proposals or things that you can act upon, and then, I mean, there is an inherent tension between scale and resilience. So if you want to have so the meaning of decentralization is clear, is that you have a large number of deciding agents, but then the meaning of resilience, the naive meaning of resilience, is that you would like to have most agents looking at each and every proposition, because if that's not the case, then you have small number of people deciding for the rest of the group, then they can kind of like make a bad decision or kidnap decisions. But then if everyone are looking at, or most people are looking at each decision, clearly it's not scalable. You cannot process many decisions at a given time period. So that's the conundrum of decentralized governance system. They cannot scale up, and that's exactly the problem of blockchain itself. The blockchain is a decentralized governance system; it cannot scale up very efficiently. So the solution, whatever it would be, I call that holographic consensus. You need to have some sort of like tricky mechanism whereby small group of people can make decision on behalf of the larger majority, right? In order to be efficient. But then it needs to be properly designed such that you are pretty well guaranteed that the decision of small groups are in really good alignment with the greater majority. That is to say that, let's say that we're 1,000 people, and now 20 people are looking at something and they decide to go for it, right? So we actually want to let them decide for the whole organization, on behalf of the organization, but we want to make sure that if, theoretically, we open up that question to the larger organization, then the organization will decide just as that small group that has decided. So that I call holographic consensus. So this is like the big conundrum of the decentralized system, and that's like one of the breakthroughs that we have made to solve that holographic consensus. To have a concrete model for holographic consensus. So basically, you asked like where we are at with this. So we have made in the past 4 years, we have made two big breakthroughs. So one of them is about architecture. So after like investigating that for years, we realized that there is no single governance protocol. In fact, there should be like an ecosystem of governance protocol that explore different rules for different use cases for different groups. So instead of building a governance protocol, we've designed a whole architecture on the blockchain it's like Lego blocks, which you can build any sort of governance system. So that's why we call it the WordPress for organization. You have templates and plugins and Lego blocks that you can combine together and basically hack any governance system. And then if you come up with a new governance system that doesn't exist yet in the system, you can quite easily add it to the library of modules and templates, and then that library is open source and growing. So that's like the first. We call that the DAO stack, so the DAO stack. So that's like the first breakthrough, the architecture for decentralized governance at scale from an ecosystemic point of view. So that's like one breakthrough, and that is fully developed and ready to launch. And the second breakthrough was to engineer and design specific protocols to allow for large scale decision making processes effectively, which we call graphic consensus. So this is also designed and implemented, and basically the whole thing is open source. So the whole stack is ready, the whole stack is developed, including the governance framework that I mentioned. We call it Arc, including an API layer. We call it ArcJS in JavaScript that allows many different collaborative applications, decentralized applications to integrate and be interoperable with each other, just as two different web applications are interoperable with each other because they're writing the same open protocol, the HTTP. So in the same way, two different web applications running on the DAO stack will be interoperable with each other. So that layer, the JavaScript API layer is ready. And we're also launching our first native interface for that world. So the whole thing is open source, was always open source. And then we're launching the whole stack basically next month at the end of March, roughly.
Yeah, I definitely love the fact that you're doing this with a JavaScript framework, because this is going to allow developers and web developers to be able to come in and be able to actually start to work with your software. So they don't necessarily have to learn the blockchain. They don't necessarily have to learn everything else. They just have to use the tools they're already comfortable using and then use your software.
Exactly. That's exactly the idea.
And Matan, so as I was reading through your white papers, going through, of course, my first thought is how to apply, could we set up a bunch of algorithms and computer rules that are, change climate change, start reversing human behavior in respect to energy production, wastewater management, garbage, things like that. And then I started thinking about too, I'm always on this kick that wherever you see conflict, right, it's any attack is a cry for help. And what those attacks are, in terms of terrorism and conflict, is they're kind of crying for governance. Every time a gunman goes through the streets of Paris, I think, oh, we need governing systems in parts of Pakistan. That's kind of the message that's really being put out there. And so I started thinking about what could you do to start diffusing conflict. And it started coming in my head as a barrage of algorithms being injected into conflict zones where you need certain rules. So if there's a conflict zone and they need water management, could you start pushing apps into conflict zones where people can start trading water, or have some kind of like system that you're proposing that start, helping with the water, and that starts bringing down conflict, it's chicken or egg things with, natural resources and conflict, stuff like that. So that's where I'm starting to see, like, there could be basically, peace apps that are kind of injected in, and, as learning happens, as these algorithms get pushed into these environments and then data comes back on what the human impact is, then you're creating this library of rules that can be used and then tailored to different situations. So that was just some of the kind of like concepts I started seeing in climate change, management of resources, and then also the reduction of conflict. Is you could set up rule systems that help people govern, and that's the reason to fight.
Totally. I mean, I actually believe. I mean, if you're touching for a moment, conflict zone, I actually believe that much of the conflicts are actually not real. Like if you could actually let the people decide what they want to do, you'll get to solutions much quicker than actually letting the governments run business. So
yeah, this is interesting because next week we're interviewing a lawyer from Austria that helped the Austrian parliament kind of start blockchain direct democracy platforms. So I guess every EU citizen has like a digital signature. They can legally sign things in the EU. And so now I guess you could basically cell phone vote pretty periodically, and then have a platform that crafts public policy according to the will of the people and puts it right before the legislator. And you're like, wow, okay, this is how these governing systems are going to improve. So I absolutely think that this is going to be one of those avoid conflict tools. But in the meantime, while we're still sitting in conflict, this might be something that could go in and start helping these things. I say, like, one of the things ISIS has proven is that bad rules are better than no rules. And, you offer a counter governance system that can be touched on everybody because everybody has a device, and you could start injecting rules into these areas where people start need rules and where it's broken down. So interesting ways to see how this is going to impact humans on a large scale and
I think
applications.
Yeah, I think there's I truly think that we have been thinking about numerous applications, but I really think that we haven't touched we're just scratching the iceberg. Like, I think there are so many different use cases and applications, for ways of people to do co-action together at scale. media. What would happen if like 500,000 journalists would form the largest free media platform? Like, I think it will change the whole society. Like really make free information. So there are so many use cases, and I mean, they can use cases that goes to healthcare. There is use cases like to agriculture, insurance, of course, finance, investment, like basically space agencies. There's a couple of projects working on decentralized space agencies. Like there is like basically unbounded array of use case coming up.
Oh yeah. Go ahead, Trent.
I was just going to say, with space agency and space travel, that's a fascinating use case because, part of the issue, especially like with the United States, when, a lot of people don't realize we lost a lot of the information, a lot of the technology that actually helped, the United States potentially get to the moon. So, now we've got potentially tools like what you're building that are going to be able to make sure that we don't lose that kind of knowledge in the future. And make sure that we have the organizational structures in place to be able to also carry that forward. Because the other thing that's kind of interesting and we haven't really touched on yet is, the fact that you are using the blockchain for this, and it does create that ledger of record. So you're going to be able to see how people voted, why they voted a certain way. You're going to be able to see the decisions groups are making and have some transparency as to, why things are being decided the way they're being decided. And then have that reputation system kind of reinforce, in hindsight, was this a good decision or a bad decision? Which, most organizations don't have systems like that, or the systems that they do have, they punish people for doing the wrong thing, but they don't reward them for doing the right thing. So, that, and, I just know from even just training my pet dog that, he responds to positive reinforcement better than he does negative reinforcement, and people aren't much different. So, if we can get systems in place that positively reinforce people for doing the right thing, then they're going to continue to do the right thing. Whereas right now, a lot of our systems, a lot of our structures, a lot of our organizations, a lot of our corporations, a lot of these things ultimately incentivize people to do the wrong thing. They are incentivized for profits. They're incentivized, look at social media. It's all optimized for advertising. It's not optimized for human connection. You take.
But that's the interesting part. And Trent, Trent turned me on to this concept that in this new realm of systems, it's going to be whoever has the most connections that's going to be the most powerful. And that's what you were alluding to, Matan, to say, what would you do if you got 1,000 people, in one direction, much less 1 million? That'll be, the efficiencies of those parallels haven't been created before in this manner. Right. Yes. So this is like an early adoption almost incentive too, to say the quicker you adopt these systems, the more influence you'll have, the more reputation you'll have, right? The more connections you'll be able to create faster. And then that'll help you grow.
Yeah. And it's really all about line of interest. Like what he said, Trent, was really right. Like right now you have the incentive, to maximize your own profit, but it's just not aligned with the incentive of the collective. But what if you actually change the positive reward structure such that maximizing your own good is actually aligned with maximizing the collective benefit. Mm-hmm. And then if you can use this toolkit to align 1,000 people around anything, and there clearly are 1,000 people out there that are aligned interests that just don't know about each other. There's no like this kind of toolkit. But if this toolkit exists, then yes, if you have, if you're aligned with 1,000 others, you can do something together. And this is like very, very powerful. So at the end of the day, you're totally right. It's about like rewarding, designing the right positive rewards and also negative. And it's about connections, and it's about the ability to align interests at scale.
And are you guys using Holo chains?
No, not right now. But I mean, we are basically so the thing is that there are like two categories of I would say infrastructure softwares below ours. So mm-hmm. There is the blockchain and there is the decentralized distributed database. So for example, blockchain can be Ethereum or other alternative platform, but right now Ethereum is the only really mature one, and distributed database can be IPFS, Swarm, Holochain, and others. So we're fairly agnostic to platform. Like eventually, we don't have any particular agenda, but right now we are building on Ethereum, and we have. I mean, we're starting in terms of like databases. We're starting with local databases, and gradually we'll put them on IPFS, Holochain, and others. So we are pretty much agnostic to that. Like we design the system such that you can put the same data both on IPFS and on a Holochain, and to be completely agnostic to that.
Okay.
Cool.
Well, hey, so I noticed in all our podcasts that when we're talking to founders, we're talking to a class of idealists. And last night after we talked to a founder, and then I had a phone call about, it was in the medical world, and a group of doctors go, well, how much are they trying to raise? I was like, I don't know. We didn't talk about that because we're all idealists, and that old system, kind of was like part of it and not recognizing it, and that, talking about what your financial goals are and what the raise goal is. But so, yeah, what is your goal in your launch, or what kind of resources are you guys trying to accumulate to continue?
Right. So yeah, I mean, we've already. So by the way, I've been working on this for years, and with all this ICO hype, like I see, all these projects with a white paper raising hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's, of course, it's creating some motion. But the thing is that I'm really against this kind of like hot air. So it was really important for me that we're not going to raise public money before we have a working product, launched with users and everything. Not just with a white paper. So finally, we are ready. Like we are ready to launch a crowd sale, planning, aiming it for the end of March. Not yet final date, but that's kind of like the plan. We've raised a few million dollars already from like private future token sale, and we want to raise in this crowd sale like within 2 months from now. We are planning to raise. We would like to raise $30 million. So some of it, of course, is to support further development, but then the rest of it is also to support building a greater ecosystem. So the whole purpose is that fund that will be raised will actually be used by the system to be invested, kind of like decentralized incubator. So be invested in projects, either projects that build more components to the stack, or projects that are coming up on top of the stack and building use cases. So the idea is to really accelerate the building of that ecosystem. We don't want to raise too much. I think $30 million. I mean, it's kind of like just the right amount. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we are already processing that. We just came out of stealth, literally like months ago. Starting building community. We're presenting publicly in the three biggest conference in the Ethereum ecosystem in the coming months and a half. So it's all growing up and getting a lot of traction very fast. There's already, I don't know, maybe between 10 to 15 applications that are kind of like in the pipeline to be integrated with the stack. Already, like one is already integrated, another one is in process, and there's like another 10 roughly that are pipeline, like in discussions to integrate. So the whole purpose is to launch a whole ecosystem, like to launch the stack with like 10 integrations, 10 application interfaces, also including our own native one. Like launching a whole ecosystem, basically.
Wow. Yeah, that's exciting. It's one of those things when you hear about a great idea and it's actually there. It's in the package. It's in the toy store. You can see it, and you've actually built it. So yeah, congratulations, and really appreciate your work, because this is world changing, and our lives are going to be impacted by your work, and I'm excited to see how that kind of like plays into, my particular life, and everybody around us, on how, I'm excited to witness this change. So really appreciate it. And is there anything else you'd like to talk about before we close up?
Well, I think, not anything particular. Again, like if anyone wants to like meet us, we'll be in ETH Denver. It's a big conference. Then we'll be in ETHCC, the Ethereum Community Conference in Paris, and then we'll be in Token Fest in San Francisco. We're putting up a new website next week, much more informative than the current one. The white paper is like, it's not yet updated. It's not updated. The white paper was written like 6 months ago. There's a lot more progress that will be coming up in the next version. The GitHub, any developer can look at our GitHub. Everything is open, like the whole stack from bottom to top.
And where can
where's your
people
team?
find you?
Oh,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Where can people find you?
Well, through the website, they can connect either to our Telegram channel group or
And
or
that's at
newsletter.
doastack.com or .io, I'm sorry.
It's DAOstack.io. Yeah, and then also there's like newsletter. I'm just now writing like a series of blog posts on decentralized governance and also on DAOstack. There's a lot of discussion there. We have a channel. We have a discussion in ETH Research. So we're basically now just opening every week. We're opening like a couple of new channels for discussions, including a new forum. So yeah, we hope to build a big community around generally decentralized governance in general, and then particular the architecture that we are offering. But by the way, we are totally in terms of vision, we are totally for a integration with other systems as well. Like I really think that we should create like a diverse ecosystem for decentralized governance architectures that eventually make a larger interoperable framework.
Oh, great. Yeah. What's the portmanteau you created for cooperation and
competition.
cooperation? Yeah. Among blockchains.
Greg, I think you were going to ask about the team as well. Could you tell us a little bit about your team?
Yeah, sure. So I've been working on this for the past 4 years. Again, like with my background in physics. And then about a year ago, I met with my second co-founder, with my first co-founder, Adam Levy. He also happened to be a physicist. I actually met him in the academy. He was doing his PhD in theoretical physics, and I was tutoring him when he was a PhD. So when he completed his PhD, he joined forces with me, and we've basically built the whole stack together. And then we have Roberto, who's a really very talented crypto law and finance architect. So he's basically in charge of the entire legal architecture. We have Jonathan, who's like a incredible guy for operations. There is Josh Zemel that you spoke with, who's kind of like in charge of all of our events and external communication. And there's Natalia, who's like in charge of the campaign. We have a product people, like a whole product team in San Francisco. Tibeto and Aaron, who are like incredible team that are building our interface. We have now new community managers. So yeah, overall, it's really like nothing of this could happen without the team. I think like each person in the team right now is kind of like is responsible for this thing happening. So it's a huge teamwork,
Great, awesome. Well, yeah. Well, hey, thanks for coming on the show. Really enjoyed the talk. Learned a lot, and absolutely excited about what's the future you're helping to build. So thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me here.
Thanks for coming on.
Looking forward to working together also with the ecological use case.
Absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate it.